My daughter stopped calling after I lost everything caring for a billionaire. I was folding a towel when the phone rang. A white towel. Soft. Expensive. The kind of towel I never would have bought for myself. It belonged to her. To Eleanor. To the woman I spent 15 years taking care of. The woman who became my whole world. The woman whose name I still cannot say without feeling something hard and sharp move in my chest. The towel was monogrammed, E.B., for Eleanor Burke. I folded it the way she liked. Corners tucked, no wrinkles. Placed on the heated shelf in the master bathroom. That bathroom was bigger than my first apartment. Marble floors, a tub that looked like something from a Roman palace, mirrors that cost more than my first car. I did that for 15 years. Folded towels, made beds, organized closets, managed staff, planned dinner parties for 200 people, held Eleanor's hand when she cried, held her hair back when she was sick from the chemo that they said would save her, but really just made her smaller and smaller until she was a bird in a silk robe. The phone rang and I looked at it on the kitchen counter. The kitchen was silent. The staff had gone home. The house was a mausoleum. Eleanor had been dead for 4 months, but I still came to work every day. What else was I going to do? I was 71 years old. My husband had been dead for 6 years. My daughter lived 3,000 miles away and called me once a week if I was lucky. My grandchildren sent Christmas cards with spelling errors and never wrote their names at the bottom. The phone kept ringing. I picked it up. It was the lawyer. Not Eleanor's lawyer. The other one. The one hired by the trust. The one with the voice that sounded like he was chewing on gravel and ice. He said, "Mrs. Keating, we need to talk about the will." I said, "What about it?" He said, "There is a problem." I said, "What kind of problem?" He said, "The kind that means you are not getting anything." I sat down on the floor, right there on the white marble. My knees gave out and I just sank, like a bag of groceries dropped too hard. The phone was still against my ear. I could hear him breathing. I could hear papers shuffling. I said, "That is not possible." He said, "Mrs. Keating, I am looking at the documents right now. The codicil was signed 6 weeks before Mrs. Burke passed away. It removes you entirely as a beneficiary. The house, the cash accounts, the trust, the art collection, the car, everything that was allocated to you in the original will has been redirected to the Burke Foundation." I said, "That does not make sense. I was with her every day. I took her to every appointment. I sat with her through every round of chemo. I held her hand when she was afraid. I was the one who found her the morning she could not get out of bed. I was the one who called the ambulance. I was the one who stayed in the hospital for 72 hours without sleeping. I was the one who watched her take her last breath. I was the one who closed her eyes." He said, "I understand this is upsetting." I said, "You do not understand anything." He said, "The codicil was witnessed by 2 people, her nephew Charles and her personal assistant of 12 years, Margaret Doyle. Both have signed affidavits confirming that Mrs. Burke was of sound mind when she signed the document." I said, "Margaret Doyle was fired 3 years ago for stealing from the household account." He said, "That is not what her affidavit says." I said, "I do not care what her affidavit says. Margaret Doyle stole $15,000 from the petty cash, and Eleanor caught her on a security camera. I was standing right there when Eleanor screamed at her. I was standing right there when she walked out the door crying." He said, "Mrs. Keating, I am not here to argue the facts. I am here to inform you of the legal situation. If you wish to contest the will, you will need to retain your own counsel." I said, "I do not have money for a lawyer." He said, "Then I am afraid there is nothing I can do." He hung up. Just like that. A man with a gravel voice and a law degree and a job to do, and he did it. He told a 71-year-old woman that she was being thrown away like a piece of trash, and then he went back to his sandwich or his golf game or whatever rich lawyers do when they destroy people's lives before lunch. I sat on the floor for a long time. The white marble was cold. I could feel it through my pants. Through my skin. Into my bones. I thought about my daughter, Sarah. I thought about calling her. I thought about telling her what just happened, but I knew what she would say. She would say, "I told you so." She would say, "You should have saved more." She would say, "You should have thought about your own future." She would say, "You gave everything to a woman who was not even your family." And she would be right. But that did not make it hurt less. I have to start from the beginning. Not the very beginning. Nobody wants to hear about my childhood in Pittsburgh. Nobody wants to hear about the factory where my father lost his thumb. Nobody wants to hear about my mother's hands that were always cracked and bleeding from the dish soap at the diner. That is not this story. This story starts 15 years ago. I was 56 years old. My husband Tom had just been diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's. The doctors said it would be slow. They said we had time. They lied. He was gone in 9 years. But in the beginning, we did not know that. In the beginning, we thought we had a decade. We thought we could plan. We thought we could save. We could not save. The medical bills ate everything. Our savings, our retirement, the equity in the house. All of it went to neurologists and physical therapists and medications that cost more than our first mortgage. Sarah was in her late 20s then. She had just gotten married. She had just bought a house in Arizona. She was building her own life. I did not want to be a burden. I told her we were fine. I lied. I told her the insurance was covering most of it. That was a lie too. I told her not to worry. That was the biggest lie of all. When Tom died, I was 65 years old. I had no savings, no retirement, no house, no car that ran reliably. I had a small life insurance policy that paid out $40,000. That was it. $40,000 for 40 years of marriage. $40,000 for raising a daughter. $40,000 for holding a man's hand while his body forgot how to work. I rented a small apartment, a 1-bedroom above a garage in a town called Westwood. The family who owned the house was nice. They let me have the garage space for free because the apartment had no parking anyway. I lived there for 6 months. I ate a lot of soup. I watched a lot of daytime television. I thought about dying. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a I am going to kill myself way. Just in a what is the point way. Then I saw the advertisement. Live-in caregiver wanted. Private estate. Competitive salary. Room and board included. Must be experienced, compassionate, and discreet. Please send resume and references. The estate belonged to Eleanor Burke. I did not know that at the time. I just knew the address was in one of the richest zip codes in the country. I sent my resume. I did not expect to hear back. I was a housewife. I was a mother. I was a widow. I had no formal training. I had no certificates. I had nothing except 15 years of taking care of a dying husband and 40 years of taking care of a family that did not need me anymore. They called me back. The interview was in a house that looked like a castle. Stone walls, iron gates, a driveway that went on so long I thought I had taken a wrong turn. Eleanor was in a wheelchair. She was 78 years old. She had bone cancer and a broken hip, and a face that looked like it had once been beautiful in a hard, unforgiving way. Her eyes were sharp. Her voice was sharp. Everything about her was sharp. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "You are not what I expected." I said, "What did you expect?" She said, "Someone younger, someone prettier, someone who would steal my jewelry and sleep with my nephew." I said, "I am too old to steal jewelry, and your nephew looks like a thumb." She laughed. That was the first time I heard her laugh. It was a real laugh, deep, rough, like gravel going down a hill. She laughed, and then she coughed, and then she said, "You are hired." I worked for Eleanor Burke for 15 years. I moved into the estate. My apartment was above the garage. 3 rooms, a kitchen, a bathroom, a bedroom with a window that faced the garden. It was small, but it was mine. Eleanor paid me $75,000 a year, plus health insurance, plus a retirement contribution, plus bonuses every Christmas. She was not generous. She was precise. She knew exactly what things cost and exactly what people were worth, and she made sure I knew that $75,000 was exactly what I deserved. But she was also lonely. That was the thing nobody saw. The staff saw a rich woman with a temper. The doctors saw a difficult patient with too many opinions. The nephew Charles saw a bank account with legs. But I saw a woman who ate dinner alone every night. A woman who had outlived 2 husbands and 3 lovers and all of her real friends. A woman who had no one to call when she was afraid. A woman who cried in the dark when she thought nobody could hear her. I heard her. every time. I would come upstairs with a cup of tea and sit on the edge of her bed and hold her hand until she stopped shaking. She never said thank you. That was not her way. But she looked at me sometimes with something soft in her eyes, and I knew she was grateful. I knew she loved me, in the only way she knew how. Sarah hated it. She came to visit once, just once. She walked through the front door and looked at the marble floors and the crystal chandeliers and the paintings on the walls, and she said, "Mom, what are you doing here?" I said, "I am working." She said, "You are being a servant." I said, "I am being a caregiver." She said, "There is a difference." We fought. Not loud. Sarah never fought loud. She fought quiet. She fought with silences and closed doors and airplane tickets booked for earlier than planned. She said I was wasting my life. She said I was pretending to be part of a family that would never really accept me. She said Eleanor Burke was using me. She said I was too old to be this naive. I said, "You do not understand." She said, "No, I do not. I understand that you were never home for my birthdays because you were taking care of Dad. I understand that you missed my daughter's first steps because you were at a doctor's appointment. I understand that you have spent your whole life taking care of other people, and now you are taking care of a woman who has more money than God, and you think that makes it noble. It does not make it noble. It makes it sad." She left. She did not come back. We talked on the phone, once a week, sometimes twice. The calls got shorter. The silences got longer. She told me about her life, her husband, Mark, her 2 girls, the new house they bought, the new car, the new job. She talked, and I listened, and I pretended that I was not jealous. I pretended that I did not want to be there for the first day of school and the dance recitals and the birthday parties. I pretended that I had chosen this life. Maybe I had. Maybe that is the worst part. I stayed with Eleanor because she needed me. That is what I told myself. She needed me, and I was good at being needed. I was good at folding towels and making appointments and remembering which medicines to take at which times. I was good at being invisible and indispensable at the same time. I was good at loving someone who could never really love me back. The years passed. Eleanor got older, sicker, meaner sometimes, but also softer. She started calling me her rock. She started telling me stories about her childhood, about her first husband who drank too much, about her second husband who loved other women, about the daughter who died when she was 12, meningitis, a fever that would not break. Eleanor held her hand for 3 days, and then she was gone. That is why Eleanor never let anyone get close. That is what I told myself. She was protecting herself. She was afraid of losing someone again. So she kept everyone at a distance. Everyone except me. I was the exception. I was the one she trusted. I was the one she called at 3 a.m, when the pain was so bad she could not breathe. I was the one who found the will. It was 2 years before she died. I was cleaning out her study. She had asked me to organize the files. She said there were papers everywhere and she could not find anything, and she was tired of asking Margaret Doyle to help because Margaret Doyle was useless. I laughed at that. Eleanor always made me laugh. I found the will in a leather folder. It was dated 7 years earlier. I was listed as a beneficiary. The house, a cash bequest of $2 million. The car, the art collection, the trust income for 10 years. I cried when I read it. I cried because I did not expect it. I cried because I did not deserve it. I cried because for the first time in my life, someone had written down on paper that I mattered. I never told Eleanor I found it. I put the folder back and finished organizing the files and went downstairs to make her lunch. But I carried that knowledge with me, like a secret, like a promise, like a future I had never let myself imagine. The last year was hard. The cancer came back. The doctor said there was nothing they could do except make her comfortable. I moved into the main house. I slept in the room next to hers. I woke up every 2 hours to check on her. I gave her morphine. I held her hand. I read to her. She liked old mysteries, Agatha Christie, Dorothy Sayers. She would fall asleep in the middle of a chapter, and I would keep reading anyway, because I liked the sound of my voice in the quiet room. Her nephew Charles started visiting more often. Charles was 53, divorced, no children. He worked in private equity, or something that sounded like private equity, but probably meant he moved money from one rich person to another and took a percentage. He had soft hands and a hard smile, and he always looked at me like I was furniture. He would come to the house and sit with Eleanor for an hour and then leave. But in the last 6 months, he started staying longer. He started asking questions about the staff, about the finances, about the will. I did not like it. I told Eleanor. She waved her hand. She said Charles is harmless. She said he is just worried about his inheritance. She said let him worry. It is the only exercise he gets. I laughed, but I also paid attention. Margaret Doyle came back. That was the thing that made my stomach turn. Margaret Doyle, who had been fired for stealing. Margaret Doyle, who had called Eleanor every name in the book on her way out the door. Margaret Doyle, who was suddenly sitting at the kitchen table with Charles, drinking coffee and looking at documents, and whispering when I walked into the room. I asked Eleanor about it. She said Charles had hired Margaret to help with some paperwork. She said it was easier than training someone new. She said stop worrying so much. I stopped worrying. That was my mistake. I stopped worrying because Eleanor told me to stop. I stopped worrying because I trusted her. I stopped worrying because I thought love was enough. 6 weeks before Eleanor died, Charles and Margaret came to the house with a lawyer. Not the regular lawyer, a different one. A man in a cheap suit with a briefcase that looked new. Eleanor was in bed. She was weak. She was on so many painkillers that her eyes had trouble focusing. Charles said they needed her to sign some documents. He said it was about the trust. He said it was just a formality. I was in the room. I watched them help her sit up. I watched them put a pen in her hand. I watched her sign her name in shaky letters, Eleanor. She could barely hold the pen. She did not read the document. She could not read the document. Her glasses were on the nightstand, and her hands were shaking, and her eyes were half closed, and she signed because Charles told her to sign. I said maybe we should wait until she is feeling better. Charles looked at me. He did not say anything. He just looked. That was enough. I was the help. I was the hired woman. I was the person who folded towels and held hands and was supposed to be seen and not heard. Margaret Doyle smiled at me. That was worse than the look. That smile. It said, I know something you do not know. It said, I win. It said, you are nothing. Eleanor died 6 weeks later. I was holding her hand. The sun was coming up. The garden outside her window was full of roses, yellow ones, her favorite. She opened her eyes and looked at me and said thank you. 2 words, that was all. Then she closed her eyes and her hand went cold, and she was gone. I stayed in the room for an hour. I did not call anyone. I just sat there holding her hand. The sun got higher. The roses got brighter. The house got quieter. I thought about all the mornings I had walked into this room, all the cups of tea, all the pills, all the tears, all the laughter, all the nights I had slept on the floor next to her bed because she was afraid of the dark. I thought about Sarah. I thought about calling her. I thought about telling her that Eleanor had died. I thought about telling her that I was going to be okay now, that I had $2 million waiting, that I could buy a house near her, that I could be a grandmother, that I could make up for all the lost time. I did not call. I sat in the chair and I waited for the sun to fill the whole room, and then I finally stood up and walked downstairs and called the funeral home. The funeral was small. Eleanor had outlived everyone. Charles was there. Margaret Doyle was there. A few old friends who flew in from New York and London. Some staff from the house. I sat in the back. I did not cry. I had done all my crying in the dark. The minister said nice things about a woman he never knew. Charles gave a eulogy that was mostly about himself. Margaret Doyle sat in the front row and dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, and I wanted to scream. I did not scream. I went back to the house. I folded towels. I made the bed. I cleaned the bathroom. I did the things I had done for 15 years because I did not know how to stop. That was 4 months ago. Now I am sitting on the floor of the kitchen, the white marble, the monogrammed towels, the heated shelf, the phone in my hand, the dial tone buzzing like a fly trapped in a jar. I call Sarah. She answers on the 4th ring. I can hear noise in the background, children screaming, a television, her husband Mark yelling something about a sandwich. Normal life, the kind of life I wanted. I say, Sarah, I need to tell you something. She says, what, Mom? I am really busy.
I say, Eleanor died. I know I told you that, but there is something else. The will.
She changed it. I am not getting anything. I am not getting the house or the money or anything. I have nothing. Silence. I say, Sarah, did you hear me? She says, I heard you. I say, I do not know what to do. She says, you should have listened to me. I say, please do not do this. She says, you spent 15 years taking care of a woman who was not your family. You missed your grandchildren growing up. You missed my birthday. You missed everything. And now you have nothing. What did you think was going to happen? I say, I thought she loved me. She says, rich people do not love anyone. They use people, and you let her use you. I say, Sarah, I am your mother. She says, I know. The silence goes on so long I think the call dropped, but I can still hear the children. I can still hear Mark. I can still hear the life I am not part of. She says, I cannot help you. I am sorry, but I cannot. We do not have the money. Mark got laid off 6 months ago. We are barely keeping the house. I did not tell you because I did not want you to worry, but we are drowning, and I cannot take care of you. I have 2 children to feed. I say, I would not ask you to take care of me. I just need to talk. She says, I have to go. The call ends. I look at the phone. I look at the white marble. I look at the monogrammed towels. I think about Eleanor. I think about her hand in mine. I think about the word love and what it means, and whether I ever really understood it. I think about Sarah. I think about the first time I held her, the way her fingers curled around mine, the way she looked at me like I was the whole world, the way she called me Mama before she learned to say Mommy, the way she used to crawl into my bed after a nightmare and fall asleep with her head on my chest. I think about all the things I did not do, all the birthdays I missed, all the recitals, all the parent-teacher conferences, all the nights I stayed with Tom when I should have been with her, all the years I gave to a dying man, and then to a dying woman, and then to no one. I think about the $2 million. I think about the house. I think about the car. I think about the art collection. I think about the trust. I think about all of it, moving from Eleanor's name to Charles's name to Margaret Doyle's smile. I think about the lawyer, the one with the gravel voice. I think about contesting the will. I think about finding a lawyer who would take my case on contingency. I think about the cost. I think about the time. I think about my age. I am 71 years old. How many years do I have left? 5, 10, 15 if I am lucky. How many of those years do I want to spend in a courtroom? I get off the floor. My knees hurt. Everything hurts. I walk to the kitchen sink and I look out the window. The garden. The roses. The yellow ones. Eleanor's favorite. They are still blooming. They do not know she is dead. They just keep blooming, because that is what roses do. I turn on the water.
I wash my hands. I dry them on a white towel, not a monogrammed one, a regular one, the kind you buy at Target for $5. I fold the towel and put it away. I do not know what happens next. I do not know where I will sleep tonight. I do not know if I will eat. I do not know if Sarah will call me back. I do not know if Charles will let me stay in the apartment above the garage. I do not know if I will ever see my grandchildren again. I do not know if I am brave enough to fight. I do not know if I am strong enough to start over. I do not know if there is anything left of me that is worth saving. But I know one thing. I know that I am still standing. I am 71 years old, and I have nothing. And I am standing in a rich woman's kitchen, folding towels that do not belong to me, and I am not crying. I will cry later, in the car, in the dark, in the apartment above the garage when no one can hear me. I will cry for Eleanor. I will cry for Sarah. I will cry for the girl I used to be, and the woman I became, and the old woman I am now. I will cry because I gave everything to people who were never going to give it back. And then I will stop crying, and I will figure out what comes next, because that is what I do. That is what I have always done. I take care of people until there is nothing left of me, and then I find something else to take care of, even if that something is just myself, even if I do not know how. The phone sits on the counter. It does not ring. It will not ring.
Not tonight, not tomorrow, maybe not ever. I pick up another towel. I fold it, corners tucked, no wrinkles. I place it on the shelf. The sun is going down. The roses are still blooming, and I am still here.